Okay, so let us go through the problems one by one. So all of you, I'll request, please take out problem sheet number 4. We have also started recording the meeting. I'm also pasting the link to problem sheet number 4 in the meeting chat. So please look at the first problem itself. Okay. So has anyone successfully attempted this problem number 1 of problem sheet 4? All right, good. Good. Among the dual degree students present, has anyone done it? All right, good. Good. All right, so a few students from the MTech batch as well as from the dual degree batch has successfully attempted it. So let's take a look at this. Okay, since many of you have not gone through it, so we have to verify that the formCijkl is equal to alpha delta ij delta kl plus beta delta ik delta jl plus gamma delta il delta jk is indeed isotropic. Please note that even though this has been written in the form of the or the notation of the elasticity tensor using the variable c, but this is the general fourth order isotropic tensor we are talking about. So had this been indeed the elasticity tensor, you note that following the last pre-recorded video lecture, there would not have been two different parameters, or rather three different parameters, alpha, beta, and gamma here. There would have been only one, because we had already shown, if you have looked at those video lectures, that beta is equal to gamma, that we have proved. Okay, so here we are not talking about the elasticity tensor, rather we are only interested in the general fourth order isotropic tensor, and our job is to show that this is isotropic. Okay, and the hint that has been provided is that we are supposed to proceed in the same way that we proceeded in question number 6 of the first problem sheet on mathematical preliminaries. So if you want to refresh your mind a little bit, you can go back and take a look there. Okay, so that problem had to do with verifying the isotropy of the second order tensor alpha delta ij, or a delta ij, perhaps it was like that. Okay, and the way that we proceeded there was to consider it in some transform coordinate system, and uh, and to show that it doesn't really matter which transform coordinate system you look at it, the form remains the same. Okay, so that is the spirit that we're going to follow for this problem also. So let me share the so I can go through. So if you can see the green colored writing app, please raise your hand. All right, thank you. You can lower your hand. Okay, so this is problem sheet 4, problem 1. So let me write down the given form for thisCijkl, that is alpha delta ij delta kl plus beta delta ik delta jl plus gamma delta il delta jk. So this is the idea here, just like question number 6 of problem sheet 1, that we will consider this fourth order tensor of this form in a different coordinate system. Different coordinate system, the motivation is that what we actually mean by different coordinate system is that we are basically looking at a different direction. Okay, we are basically looking at a different direction, and if for any arbitrary or generic direction we can show that the form remains the same, so we are basically done. So that is the logical step involved here. So we know that the transformation from this general coordinate system to uh, to the non-dashed or the non-primed coordinate system will be through these rotation tensors. So let us say that in the undashed or the non-primed coordinate system, the indices will be P, Q, R, S. Okay, so it is in the dashed coordinate system that we have CIJKL, and in the non-dashed coordinate system we have PQRS. So correspondingly, because we are dealing with a fourth order tensor here, we have to write this using, so the transformation rule will involve 4 rotation tensor terms. Okay, so let me write this down. It will make sense in a moment. Okay, so I'm basically using my understanding from the first chapter. All right, now that I have this, what I can do is for this PQRS, I can just use this. I can use this form. I'll keep these terms as they are, the rotation terms as they are. And for this one, CPQRS, I'll use alpha delta PQ delta RS plus beta delta IR delta QS plus gamma delta I delta PS delta QR. Now all that we have to do is to deploy the substitution power of these Kronecker deltas on these terms. Okay, so first of all, we note that there is a P here and there is a P here. It is the Q which is not common, so we write this as QI small q. We might as well have done the same thing by substituting this term, okay, the JQ by JP. Okay, so it works absolutely the same way, so no need to worry. And let us not forget that there is an alpha here, so this alpha goes here. The second term, it remains as it is. This one, this KR, that I can replace by this R gets replaced by this S. So QKS. And finally, this one remains as it is. So that is the first multiplication taken care of. Next, for the term involving beta, what we'll have is, so what we'll do is we'll substitute this I here with this R. So the way that I'm proceeding is not the unique way. We might as well proceed in a different fashion also. Okay, by substituting things differently. So please note that I have already exhausted whatever substitution I had to do involving the delta IR with this one and delta QS with this one. Okay, so these two terms, they remain as they are. Again, delta PS, I'll make it operate substitute here. So that will be QIS, and this one, these last two remain as they are. Now all that I have to do is use the property that if we have these kinds of multiplications, so that is basically delta ij. Okay, so this is QIQ, QJQ. Whenever these two things are common, this is basically just the delta ij. And similarly here, this is the delta KL. For this beta term, the term involving the beta, let's see that we have the QRP, and what it has common with is with this term QKR. Okay, so all that you have to write here is delta. So R and R are the dummy indices. If we combine the first and the third Qs, so what will just be left with is the, I think I made a mistake. Yes. For this beta term, I had, actually the mistake was actually here in this step. So I'll make the correction here. So this was supposed to be PRQS. That's where it went wrong. A small mistake, but important consequences. So this will be PRQS. Consequently, I will have this thing correct also. So when I do this this multiplication delta PR with this, what I will actually get is QIR here. Okay, so when I take this QIR common with this QKR, or multiply directly with this QKR, what I will end up with is delta IK, because R is the dummy indices considering this one and this one. Next, I'll have JL here because S is common. And finally, for the term involving gamma, I'll consider this term common with this term because the S is common here. So that will give me delta IL, and when I take this QJR together with QKR, the R being common, what I'll be left with is delta JK. And you note that this form that I have obtained, okay, this form that I have obtained, it looks like this, okay, but actually this is the form that is in the dashed coordinate system or the primed coordinate system. So the form remains exactly the same no matter what arbitrary orientation you look at. Okay, so this basically shows us that that the given form of the fourth order tensor is indeed isotropic. Okay, so you need to actually, so this is not the end, you have to actually write that sentence. Okay, so because the form remains unchanged even in the dashed or the primed coordinate system, when compared with the undashed or the unprimed coordinate system, that is why we have to conclude that irrespective of which direction we may be looking at, the fourth order tensor, the given form of the fourth order tensor is indeed isotropic. So if you have any doubts about this, please ask me. So right, Hitesh, I did not see your thing. Now I have seen it. I should have seen it earlier. It would have made my life easier. Thank you for pointing that out anyway. If anyone else has any doubt about it, please ask. So Arival, it doesn't matter. If we get QRI, QKR, then also it is delta IK. You can actually verify this by writing the corresponding matrix forms. Okay, and and just employ whatever you learned regarding orthogonal matrices in your first year. So does anyone else has any doubt regarding this question number 1 of problem sheet 4? I'll wait maybe half a minute and then we can proceed. All right, it seems that none of you have any doubt regarding this question 1. So let us proceed to the next one. Okay, so in question number 2, it is stated that the constitutive law for a linear elastic isotropic solid is given by this very familiar form by now. So from this relation, we have to find the inverse relation. Okay, so we have to find out the epsilon ij in terms of sigma ij. And a hint has been given to us. So you please read this. So has anyone attempted this problem? So other than the dual degree students, I mean, because this problem is a repetition from the problem sheet, the corresponding problem sheet from the mechanics of solids autumn 2019. So many of you have already done it. Among the MTech students, has anyone done it? Please raise your hand. Question number 2 of problem sheet 4. Has anyone done it from the MTech batch? Okay, since there are no hands raised, let us try to do it here. So we have been given that sigma ij is equal to lambda epsilon kk delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. Now note that, is anyone trying to say something?
Yes, sir. I'm Kashi. Sir, I did this answer, sir, but I got a term which is very long. So can I tell that?
I cannot hear you, Kasi.
Sir, I did this question. I got an answer in the long term. Big term.
I still can't hear you. Maybe you can write it down in the meeting chat. I mean, your audio is coming out very broken. You write down in the meeting chat. So I'll proceed with the solution here. So it is asked that we should find out the epsilon ij in terms of the sigmas. Okay, so suppose you imagine. So what is the challenge here? The challenge here is is this term, is this first term. Suppose by some magic this first term was not present. Then it would have been a child's play to just take this twice g to the left hand side, and we could have simply written epsilon ij is 1 by twice g sigma ij. It would have been as simple as that. Unfortunately, because of the presence of this term, we cannot do such a simple thing. Okay, so this is containing the first invariant of the strain tensor. Okay, this is basically the epsilon 1 1 plus epsilon 2 2 plus epsilon 3 3. So if somehow we can convert this term in terms of the stresses, then our job would be done. So what we have to basically do is to find out an expression for this epsilon kk. And that can very well be done by taking this I equal to j equal to some index p, let's say. Okay, so to find this epsilon kk, which you note is very much equal to epsilon pp or epsilon qq, whatever. Okay, as long as the subscripts are repeated, it's the same thing. To find this, what we'll do is uh, we set I equal to j equal to p in this above relation. So what we'll obtain is sigma pp is equal to lambda. This epsilon kk remains as it is, but this is delta pp now. And then we have twice g epsilon pp. The good news here is that this epsilon kk is exactly the same thing as this epsilon pp. Okay, so we can in fact write this as epsilon kk. There is no problem. And this actually serves our purpose perfectly, because then we can note in the very next line that we can take this epsilon kk common, and whatever remains here is this delta pp is 3. Okay, so I hope you all understand this delta pp is delta 1 1 plus delta 2 2 plus delta 3 3, that is 3. So this is basically 3 lambda plus twice g, which means that epsilon kk is nothing but sigma pp divided by 3 lambda plus twice g. Therefore, if we go back to this original relation, what we'll have is sigma ij is equal to lambda. So epsilon kk I can replace by this thing, sigma pp divided by thrice lambda plus twice g delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. So all that you have to do here is write the epsilon ij is equal to sigma ij minus lambda by 3 lambda plus twice g delta ij. All right. So I hope this is clear to everyone. Okay. So if you have any issues with it, please let me know. Right. So there is a 1 by twice g. You're absolutely right. So just let me correct this. So this is equal to 1 by twice g times the whole thing. So if you have any doubt about this, please let me know. Ashish is saying sigma pp is missing. Oh, right. Sorry. Here we have a sigma pp. Sigma pp or sigma kk, whatever. So please make this correction. Okay. Sorry about that. So next, if you don't have any doubts about question number 2, you please proceed to question number 3 and read it carefully and try to see what's going on there. You take a minute or two for this. Okay, so for question number 3, you see what is said. So by choosing specific values of the indices in the expression ofCijkl for a linear elastic isotropic material, express lambda and g in terms of various components ofCijkl, or equivalently the Cp q bar, which is in the Voigt notation, and additionally we have been asked whether these expressions are unique. So first of all, you try to figure out the expressions of lambda and g in terms of the various components of this C, I, J, K, L. So what I mean to say is that suppose you substitute different values for this I, J, K, L, then how can these lambda and g be expressed in terms of, let's say, C1111 or C1122 or maybe C1133, okay, something like that. Okay, so think about it for a minute or two. So after we have discussed this problem, I'll discuss a little bit about tomorrow's test. Please remind me. So has anyone managed to do it? Please raise your hand if you have managed to do it, either right now or maybe earlier. Any of the dual degree students tried to do it? Because this problem was certainly not there in your autumn 2019 problem sheet. Are you able to hear me? Please raise your hand. All right. So has anyone, any of the dual degree students tried to do it? This problem number 3. No, it doesn't come out as unique, Puli.
Sir,
Yes, Pavan.
sir, so we can set I equal to J and K equal to L inCijkl.
Yeah, but you cannot just set it to be I equal to J, but actually you have to set it to be some specific numbers like I equal to J equal to 1 or I equal to J equal to 2. Only then you'll be able to write down the specific
Yes,
expressions.
sir. That I will do in the next step. Like at the
Yeah.
last, that can be done. If we take
Okay.
I to J, then the reduced form will become Cik equal to lambda plus 2J into delta Ik square. If I take I equal to K equal to 1, then we'll get the form for lambda. If I don't take I equal to K, then we'll get for G.
Right. So the idea here is that because you have the in the expression ofCijkl combinations like so the terms that are sitting with the G, they have the delta Ik delta JL plus delta IL delta JK. So if you don't set the I equal to K, then those terms will vanish. The terms involving the G, and whatever is left is just the lambda. And then if you take it in a slightly separate fashion so that none of the terms vanish, so then what you will end up with is both lambda and G present. Does that make sense? So maybe it will be easier when I just write it down. So what I'm saying is this. Let me go to a new page. So for question number 3, I have myCijkl. If I can figure this out, I'll be able to write down the corresponding void notation also, the C bars. So this is lambda delta Ij delta KL plus G delta Ik delta JL plus delta IL delta JK. I hope this expression is clear to everyone. Okay, so this we basically obtained after showing that in the general fourth order isotropic tensor, the beta is equal to gamma, and then we went on to say that usually in elasticity we use the parameters lambda and G, which are referred to as the Lamy parameters, instead of the alpha and beta. So it is that form. Now what we are saying is that, let's say, okay, so the motivation is to do like this. So we have been asked to find out expressions for lambda and G. Generally for this, we have both lambda and G present. So can we perhaps choose such indices for this I, J, K and L that maybe this term vanishes? And we can do that easily. So suppose we take, okay, so set I equal to J equal to 1 and K equal to L equal to 2. So there is nothing holy or sacrosanct about this 2 or this 1. You might as well have taken I equal to J equal to 2 and K equal to L equal to 1. Or you could have taken I equal to J equal to 3 and K equal to L equal to 1, or K equal to L equal to some like 2 also, if you take this as 3. As long as they are different, it is going to work. Why it is going to work? Because you see in this term we have so if you choose these particular things, then this one will be 1, this one will be 2. So this term vanishes, this one becomes 0. Similarly, I equal to 1, L equal to 2 makes this term 0 also. So whenever the indices of the Kronecker delta are different, that term becomes 0. So this becomes 0, this becomes 0. This entire second term involving the g, it becomes 0. So, and but see here, we have I equal to j equal to 1. So this is delta 1 1, which is 1, and this delta 2 2, that is also 1. So this lambda, it survives. Okay, so then what we'll have is C 1 1 2 2 is equal to lambda, and that is one of the answers for lambda. I'm saying one of the answers because it is very much possible that you can also write this equivalently as so also C 1 1 3 3 and C maybe 2 2 1 1. Okay, many other choices like this 3 3 2 2. Okay, as long as the first two are the same and the second two are the same and they are different, so it works. Okay, and so on. We have other choices also. All right.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, so here, even without putting I equal to j equal to 1 and k equal to l equal to 2, like we can assume I equal to j and k equal to l, then the left hand side will become C ij equal to lambda. So doesn't that mean that
say that
summation,
again? I did not understand.
here you have taken specific values for I and j, right? I, j,
Yes,
k, l.
yes, yes.
So without taking specific values, then we'll
Yeah.
get C ik equal to lambda. So doesn't that mean C 1122, C 2233, C 3344? The summation is equals to lambda.
No, 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 no. It's a different thing. So suppose, okay, so let's go to the rough column and write this. So suppose you said C, let's say I equal to J equal to some P. Okay. So this is CPP, let's say. And this K equal to L equal to Q. That is what you are saying, right?
Yes, sir.
So like this. And then you want to write this as lambda delta PP, right? And delta
Yes.
QQ.
Oh.
Okay, and then this will be G delta. So this will be what? PQ,
Mm.
right? And
Yes.
then delta. You understand now what the problem is?
If we take P not equal to Q, I mean, if we take those two as independent,
No, no.
then
So that's the thing, right? So when you are writing in index notation, at one point you cannot think of them as indices, and then at the very next step, just because we find it convenient, we don't take them to be specific values. It can't work like that. So if you're saying specific values, you have to take these specific values really. Okay, so otherwise you see when you are saying that, okay, these are not specific values, and then you are saying that this delta PP is equal to 3, then you are using it, then you are treating them like proper indices, right? But then at the very next term, you are saying that, okay, these are no longer indices, these are like separate things. So I will set them to be equal to 0. So this is wrong. This can't be. Okay, so you can't have it both ways. So this will be what?
PQ.
Yeah, PQ. Okay, so basically twice of that. Okay, it doesn't really help us. You have this 3 lambda plus twice G delta PQ. So what's the, I mean, we cannot eliminate any of the terms using this. So that's why in the question only it is said that you have to take specific values of this and then write this down. Now you tell me, so that is a no-go. Okay, we can't proceed like this. Writing that is not wrong. Nothing has gone wrong there. But what you have been asked to find out, we cannot find that out by using this route. We have to actually set specific values here. Now you tell me what will be the corresponding void notation of these things. What is the corresponding void notation of C1122?
C12.
C12 bar.
Bar.
Okay, so and what about this? So this will be C13 bar. This will be C21 bar. This will be C32 bar, like that. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Next, you think what will happen? So we have only managed to find out lambda till now. What about the G? So now we can go forward and try to find out G by choosing such values of I and G that these terms, they do not vanish, because now we can utilize the knowledge that we have about the lambda in terms of these various components of CijKL. Okay, so suppose we say that we set this time set I equal to j equal to k equal to l equal to 1 as a very specific example. This thing is written just with the motivation of finding out some value of G, and then we'll think whether we can find other alternative values of G also. So this is C1111 lambda. This delta 11 is 1, delta KL is 1. So this is basically 1. And here we have again, so delta 11, that is 1, delta 11, this is 1. This is also delta 111, delta 111. So overall this is 1 and this is 1, so that's twice G. Okay, but we already know lambda. Okay, so suppose we say that we'll set this lambda equal to this, whatever we have actually formally found out. We might as well use any of these other alternative things that we just wrote down. Any of them will work. So what we can say here is that G is equal to half of C1111 minus lambda, and just substitute any of the known values of lambda. It is going to work. So C1111 minus, let's say, C1122. So in the corresponding void notation, what we'll have is C11 bar minus C12 bar. That's it. Alternatively, we can have or we can have half of C11 bar minus any of these things. Okay, let's say C21 bar. Or you can have so many other expressions. Okay, so definitely just from this little exercise, we can immediately answer this and the second part of the question number 3. So are these expressions unique? Certainly not. Okay, the expressions are not unique. And that makes sense because you see, when we are writing theseCijk like this, I mean, these can take any values, right? This can take any values, and here on the right hand side we have only 2 of them, lambda and G, as the independent parameters. So of course we are not going to have unique expressions for lambda and G. Okay. Of course this is only true for linear elastic isotropic solid. For other kinds of materials we'll have different expressions, certainly. So please let me know if you have any doubts about this question number 3, how we have proceeded. Arivoli is saying, sir, we can have C1221 equal to G. Let's see. So 1221 will definitely, so I equal to 1, J equal to 2, and K equal to 2, L equal to 1. That is certainly going to eliminate the lambda term. There is no doubt about it. Now, so Arivoli is saying 1221, right? So I equal to 1, J equal to 2, K equal to 2, L equal to 1. So let's see this term. So this is I equal to 1, K equal to 2. So that vanishes. And I equal to 1, L equal to 1. That remains. J equal to 2, K equal to 2. That remains. So we'll definitely have G is equal to, as Arivoli has written, C1221. That is perfectly all right. Okay, very good. Absolutely possible. If you have found any other expressions, anyone else, please write it down. Most welcome, most heartily welcome. Not for lambda. Lambda is quite, yeah, lambda is easy. Think about G. Dipanshu, so just to digress a little bit, Dipanshu, are you available for tomorrow's test?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, good. How did your test go?
Fine, sir. They are fine.
Your exam was held now recently?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 21
Okay,
to
okay,
24.
okay, okay. It went well, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You all have written a number of other expressions. So I hope all of you are correct. Let me not dwell on them. Okay. Honestly, I did not expect so many answers. Suddenly you guys have woken up at 9 o'clock. Okay, good. I'm not going to check through all of them. Maybe later we can do this, or maybe you can cross verify amongst yourself. Okay, let's proceed to the next problem. Okay, so when I say next problem, I don't mean question number 4. Okay, because if you just take a careful look at question number 4, 5, 6, you'll see that those are pretty simple. Okay, I had kept those problems even when these fourth year dual degree students were in their third year, they were able to do it quite easily. I'm sure everyone can. Uh, I think it will be more interesting if we go to the next question. Just give me a minute, guys. Someone has come. I'm having this class from my quarter. Someone is knocking at the door. Just give me a minute. Sorry about that. So Akhil Prem is writing there are only 3 equations possible, rest elements are 0. Which question are you referring to, Akhil? Akhil, can you please unmute yourself?
So in question number 3.
Question number 3. What do you mean only 3 equations are possible?
So these 3 equations, that is the lambda plus 2g, lambda and g, only for these 3 values.
Right. Yeah.
Rest elements are 0.
Okay. Yeah. That's all we need, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So the next question is by Arivoli. So he's asking, in question 6, how to say E is positive. So from physical knowledge, so E is Young's modulus. Okay. And how do you calculate Young's modulus? So from those physical considerations, it doesn't follow from anything mathematical. Arivoli, were you not in my section last time? I forget. Were you not in my section of mechanics of solids? Probably not. Right. I'll leave question number 4, 5, and 6 for now. Let us go to question number 7. If we have time, we'll come back to this question numbers 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so all of you, please take a look at question number 7. It's very important at this level. Okay, let us not always be hung up with the undergraduate kind of things. Those are absolutely important. We should not neglect that. But I mean, a lot of it is just getting tangled up in the algebra. Okay, so maybe we learn something new in these live sessions. Okay, so everyone please read this. It's an extremely important question. Okay, so for a linear elastic isotropic solid material, so I'm reading out question number 7 of this problem sheet 4. For a linear elastic isotropic solid material, show that the principal axis of strain coincide with the principal axis of stress. So this is the question. Okay, this first sentence is the question. Okay, so we have to show that the principal axis of strain, they coincide with the principal axis of stress. So already one of you have asked this question in the discussion channels. Okay, quite early on, maybe a week or so back, that we are separately finding out the principal strains and the corresponding principal directions in the kinematics chapter. And then again, in the stress chapter, we are finding out the principal stresses with the corresponding principal axis or the principal directions of the stresses. Question is, in general, are they going to coincide? So let me just give you one funda is that in general, no. The answer is no. Okay. For any arbitrary material behavior, it is not going to be so that the principal axis of strain, they coincide with the principal axis of stress. No. However, it just so happens very nicely that if you consider a linear elastic isotropic solid material, they do indeed coincide. Okay. They do indeed coincide. It's very nice. The issue at hand is that we have to show that this is so. Okay, so how do you go about doing it? So some hints and some things are provided. Okay, you take a look. So this second part of the question, that does you show that the principal stresses can be expressed in terms of the principal strains like this, you will see that when we try to do the proof, this result, it automatically comes out. You don't have to think about the second part of the question separately. It just comes out as a natural consequence of the proof. Okay, so you please take a look at the hint. So in the hint, we have been asked to consider the two eigenvalue problems separately. So first one is for the eigenvalue problem for finding out the principal stresses, sigma ij minus sigma delta ij ni is equal to 0. And the second one is the corresponding eigenvalue problem for the principal strain. Okay, and it is mentioned very clearly that this sigma without any subscript, superscript, that is the generic principal stress, and the epsilon, that is the generic principal strain. Okay, and ni and n dash are the principal directions corresponding to the stresses and strains. Now please note that a priori here I have not written that ni in the eigenvalue problem for the principal stress and the unit direction in the eigenvalue problem for the principal strain, they are the same. So I have actually kept them separate, ni and ni dash. Okay, because that is what we have to prove, right? That they are the same. So I cannot a priori assume that they are the same. Okay, so how do we go about doing it? Any ideas? Please note that we have to use the information that the material we are considering is a linear elastic isotropic one. So Shubham is suggesting something. So he's saying that we can substitute the expression of sigma ij into the equation of the eigenvalue. Right, we can definitely do that. We'll try that out. We have to somehow prove their dot product is 1. Yes, that is an idea, but that's a roundabout way of doing things. So what Shubham is saying, I like that. Okay, so let's see if we can proceed by that route and show something. Okay, so let's try question number 7. So we have this thing sigma. So I'm writing down the eigenvalue problem statement for the principal stress as it is given in the hint. Right, so this is the statement. Now for a linear elastic isotropic behavior, we have sigma ij. We've written this so many times earlier. Lambda epsilon kk delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. So suppose we substitute this back here. What happens? Let's just try this. There is no harm. So this is lambda epsilon kk delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. The second term remains as it is. Now you see this delta ij term, this is present here also. Okay, so perhaps we can take these two things common. So just rewriting this, so basically just some algebraic manipulation we are doing. Okay. Just some algebraic manipulation. And in the next step, we'll just divide throughout by twice g so that this is like this. All right. So we have written down this. So what have we achieved in the process? You see, this is epsilon ij like it should be present in the eigenvalue statement of the principal strain. This one here is just a constant term, rather I should say a scalar term, because see this sigma by itself is a scalar, this lambda is very much a scalar, the epsilon kk, that is there are no free indices here, so it is very much a scalar, and of course this denominator is also scalar. So overall this term is a scalar term, and this is multiplied with this delta ij. So again this second term present within this bracket, it is again like the generic statement of the generic eigenvalue statement that we have for the principal strains. So there is a little bit of an issue here because I should not be writing this as lambda, that will be just be confused with the Lanis parameters. Rather, I should be writing the eigenvalue statement in this form. Okay, so this is the given eigenvalue statement. All right, so now you compare this one with that. Just compare. They're exactly the same forms. The only difference is present here. So suppose we say, and please note that there is nothing sacrosanct about this choice of this epsilon. We may call it by any other scalar parameter. Okay, so just as I was going to write lambda, so I can write this as lambda bar. Okay, just to distinguish it from the Lamis parameter, or maybe something else, maybe some k. It doesn't matter. So you see, this can very well act as a proxy for this. And if it is so, then this statement that we have derived just now from the principal stress statement, okay, the eigenvalue problem for the principal stress, that is exactly in the same form that the eigenvalue problem for the strain should be. Okay, the eigenvalue problem for the principal strain should be, which means that this should be in the should be the principal strains, and this one should be nothing but the Ni dash. Okay, and that's all there is to it. We don't have to go about any roundabout way of doing it. Just by comparing the two forms, we can see that this is exactly the eigenvalue problem statement for the principal strains. So just by comparing the terms, you can say that this Ni has to be equal to this Ni dash. There is no other way, because the eigenvalue problem statement must be unique. Furthermore, this constant term that we have, or the scalar term that we have, that is the form for the principal strains. And that is exactly, so from this information about the form for the principal strain, you can see that we can obtain this thing. Okay, so why we can obtain this thing? Because you see this thing, if I write this as sigma minus lambda epsilon kk twice g is equal to epsilon, this can be very well written as lambda epsilon kk plus twice g epsilon. So you note this form. So this superscript p here basically represents the principal stress. This is written as lambda j1, but what is j1? j1 is nothing but this epsilon kk itself. That is the first strain invariant. Let us not forget that. So this is very much sigma is equal to lambda j1 plus twice g epsilon, like exactly that has been given here. Okay, so that's it, done. It almost seems like cheating that we have just compared these forms and suddenly we are claiming this thing. Okay, but this is the actual mathematical logic behind this is that the eigenvalue problem for a particular matrix or a particular tensor, it has to be a unique statement. Okay, so that is the subtle logic present here. So does that make sense to everyone? If not, please let me know. So the actual, see, I'm sure that as far as just comparing the terms one by one, so I'm trying to answer Tarun Santosh's question, who is saying that could you explain how you compared both eigenvalue problems? So Tarun, I'm sure that as far as just comparing the terms one by one is concerned, that part is not the problem here for you. Okay, you can of course see that where epsilon ij should be present, you do have epsilon ij. Where a scalar term should be present, there is a scalar term. Where a delta ij should be present in an eigenvalue statement, there a delta ij is present. Okay, so those one by one correspondences of the various terms, that is fine. But the subtle mathematical logic present here is that if you have a tensor, a general tensor like epsilon ij, sigma ij, the eigenvalue problem or the eigenvalue statement for that should be a unique one. Okay, so if you are obtaining a form for the eigenvalue statement in this fashion, so on this one, as I'm hovering my cursor over this statement, and on the other hand, you also have this form, there is only one possibility that they are the same forms. Okay, so that's why this double-headed arrow. And because they are the same forms, this ni must correspond to this ni dash, and this scalar term must correspond to this epsilon. That's the logic.
Yes, sir.
So does anyone else have any question regarding this question number 7? It's an extremely important problem. So if you have any issues, please don't feel shy to ask. So let us proceed with the other problems that are left. In between, if you have issues, we can address them. All right, so thank you, Pranjal, for reminding me. So right, so about the test tomorrow, it is going to start at 12 o'clock as already announced. And I will give you a little bit of buffer time. So overall the test I mean, both the questions are very short. Okay, there are 2 questions. Both of them are very short. I mean, you can finish it within half an hour, I think. If you can figure out, okay, what you have to do. If not, then maybe you have to think a little bit more. I think that 1 hour time overall should be more than sufficient for everyone. Okay. Nevertheless, I will give you a buffer time beyond that 1 hour. So the process will be like this. So just so that you are all mentally prepared about what to do. So your submission. So first of all, you will receive the question paper. Okay, I will release it here on MS Teams. You can download the question paper. The instructions will be on the first page, and the questions will be on the second page. All right. Regarding the instructions, so let me just give you a heads up. First, after looking at the question paper, you read through the instructions carefully. Even if it takes you 5 minutes to read through it, read it carefully. Okay, you will have more than sufficient time to answer the questions. Nevertheless, some of the things that I will ask you to be a priori prepared with, that you should have some proper A4 sheets. Okay, you should have your phone charged and everything, so that you can very easily scan it at the end of your test and upload it in MS Teams. Okay, this is very, very important. Okay, so before it is 12 o'clock, you charge your phone and everything, be ready with it. Keep some A4 sheets ready, about 5-6. Okay, you won't need 5-6, but I'm just saying 5-6 A4 sheets ready, so that you can write your solutions there. After you have done it, you scan it, and then you must, again, just like your assignment sheet, you must combine them in a single PDF. You must also ensure that they are not rotated, they are not of poor quality, all these things. Okay, I will not, because I am announcing these things beforehand, because I'm giving so much extra time, I will not entertain any requests about reconsideration of poor marks or marks penalized because of difficulties associated in evaluating your submission if something is not clear. Okay, so the main thing that you need to be the main things that you need to be ready with are the A4 sheets and your camera. So for scanning, whatever scanning software you need to install and do these things, whatever is your preference, do it. You must have already done it while doing your assignment submission. If you faced any difficulty with a particular app, test it out today with some test pages. Okay, some general pages, example pages, you test it out. Okay, because at that crunch moment, okay, I will not entertain any sort of request for reconsideration that my scanning software was not working. Okay, I could not upload it because of this reason or that reason. I will not entertain these things. Okay, I am sorry, I have to be a little bit strict about this. Okay, regarding the questions, so so if I give something like an index kind of problem, okay, some proof-based problem, I will expect that you do it by proper index-based proof. Okay. However, if you find that you are absolutely not able to proceed by the index thing, then you may proceed by complete expansion. Okay, but please do not try to do that at the very first go. People who try to who do it by index notation will get the full credit. People who do it by full expansion will not get zero, certainly not get zero, but will be penalized a little bit. Okay, it basically means that you have not yet learned what I wanted you to learn. Okay, so the mathematical preliminaries chapter as well as the subsequent chapters have placed a lot of emphasis on learning this index notation. If you have not done till now, then you will be penalized. So anything else that you want to ask about the test, please ask me. Whatever came to my mind, I have already said. If you want to ask something, ask by unmuting yourself or maybe write in the meeting chat. This is the time, okay? I'm sure question numbers 4, 5, 6 can wait. Okay, I mean, if you just put your head to it a little bit, you will be able to figure it out. But please be absolutely sure that you do not have any lingering doubts regarding the mechanics of this or the logistics of this test, live test 1. It is as serious as a mid-semester examination. So Arivali, as I mentioned that there will be a buffer time for this. So that is what is meant by extra time. Okay, so if the actual test duration is of 1 hour, I will set the deadline for the uploading to complete maybe 10 minutes later. Okay, maybe 1:10 or 1:15, something like that. If you faced any difficulty during the uploading of your assignment 1, please remember that, please try to remind yourself of that and ask if you have any doubts regarding that right now. See, I'm giving you ample opportunity. So every time I'm repeating myself, okay, I am pushing you more and more into a corner in the sense that later if you come back to me and say that I didn't know about this or I didn't know about that, that is not going to be entertained. All right, so if you have no other questions, you can, of course, if something pops into your mind, you can ask it. In the remaining time that we have, let us go to one of these questions, 4, 5, 6, and see if we can do something about them. I think it'll be good if we can just take up this question number 5. Okay, question number 4 is just pure algebra. Okay, you just have to compare the two terms and see. Okay, so let us not get into question number 4. Question number 5, you see. Again, this is something which is which has already been done by many of the dual degree students, especially if they were in my section last year. So there is some question about so let me see. Rahul is asking for question number 9. Principal stresses come out to be. So are you talking about?
Yes, sir, PS4.
PS4. Where are you seeing question number 9?
So there are 3 questions after this question number 7, 8, 9, and 10.
Oh, sorry. How did I miss this? I'm really sorry. So right, so actually this question number 9, I mean, we had discussed this with I discussed this with the dual degree students. It completely skipped my mind. Sorry about that. Okay, so let us not do this question number 5. It's fairly easy. Let's go to these other problems. Sorry about this. Okay. Uh, uh, so you were asking about question number 9, Rahul.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So question 9, principal stresses come out to be 211.329 MPa and okay, so right now I cannot do this calculation and verify. We can definitely take a look. Okay, so Shayan, if you're present here, can you please check this out? I'll also give it a check. Shayan, are you present? All right. So can you please take a look at this question number 9 later on? I'll also take a look. Okay, regarding the principal stresses, what Rahul Agarwal is asking. Okay. Ranjan is asking about question number 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, right. I missed that. So let's take a look at right. So let's take a look at question number 8. So it has been mentioned that we are supposed to consider an incompressible elastic material. So earlier in the problem sheet on kinematics, we were to show that epsilon kk is equal to 0 when the change in volume is 0. So perhaps all of you remember this. Okay, that when the cubical dilatation was 0, basically the J1, the epsilon kk is equal to 0, was 0, considering small deformation theory. Okay, now we have been asked to show that this constraint of epsilon kk is equal to 0, it implies that the Poisson's ratio nu is equal to half. So how can we go about doing it? So any ideas?
So yes, sir, from the epsilon kk equal to p by k, like the mean stress equation, we can use there. You can use that.
So epsilon kk is equal to
Minus p by k.
right. So who is saying this?
Pawan.
Yes, Pawan. Right. So everyone, as Pawan just mentioned, if you can quickly take a look at question number 5. Okay, so if you read this question, you will see that we have been asked to show that, so for a hydrostatic state of compression, sigma ij is equal to minus p delta ij, show that the dilatation is given by this minus p by k. Okay, so we actually have this result, as Pawan was mentioning, that epsilon kk is equal to minus p by k. Now, see, if we have this kind of a relation, then Pawan, can you please follow through with your logic?
Yes, sir. So for this case, I mean, in this question, as epsilon kk equal to 0,
Right,
as p is a constant, then k2 should tend to infinity.
right.
That means 1 by k should tend to 0.
Yes,
That implies gamma tends to half. Sorry, nu tends to half.
right, right. So if you if every one of you can see, so let me just write it down quickly. So we are looking at question number 8a. Let me do this quickly. Let's go to the next page. Okay. Question number 8a. Epsilon kk that has been given to us is 0. So basically that means that the cubical dilatation, that is 0. Now, as per question 5, we have that epsilon kk, the cubical dilatation, is equal to minus p by k. This p is a finite, has a finite magnitude. So if epsilon kk is 0, it basically implies that k should tend to infinity. That's the only way that is possible. Okay, now k, if you look at the expression of k, what is k? K is the bulk modulus. Okay, so the expression of k, it involves e, so it is e by 3 into 1 minus 2 nu. So k is the bulk modulus. And k is equal to e by 3 into 1 minus 2 nu. This tending to infinity implies that this denominator 3 into 1 minus 2 nu, it must tend to 0, and that is possible only when nu tends to half. That's it. So Pawan is perfectly all right. Let us quickly go to question number 8b. So referring to the expressions of the Lamy parameter lambda and the bulk modulus k found earlier, show that both lambda and k tend to infinity when nu tends to half. So k tends to infinity, we have already talked about it. Okay, so but let us take a look at the expression of k involving the lambda and g. Okay, so we have this expression. So k is equal to 3 lambda plus twice g by 3. Does that help us in answering question number 8b? I'll give you a hint. Don't just get limited by question number 5. Okay, the expressions given in question number 5, don't get limited by that. So you see the other expressions which are present in question number 4. Okay, so you please take a look at lambda is equal to e nu divided by 1 plus nu 1 minus 2 nu, g equal to e by 2 into 1 plus nu. All of these things you take, think about together. Okay, so for 8b, let's say that we are considering first lambda, that is e nu divided by 1 plus nu into 1 minus twice nu. Okay, so if nu is tending to half, what does that imply? Doesn't it imply that lambda is tending to infinity? So just from here, it's a simple case of taking the limit here. So nu tending to half has no problem here in this term, but here, okay, so if nu tends to half, then this tends to 0. So overall, this lambda tends to infinity. Okay, so this is referring to, so from question 4. K, we have already talked about the bulk modulus. So we don't have to go into that again. Now 8c, this is interesting.
Sir?
Yes.
That is when nu tends to infinity. Like he asked us to find out what happens when nu tends to infinity. In 8b.
No. So that's a, sorry, that's a typing mistake.
Okay.
So nu tends to infinity. So see, that's actually completely meaningless, because why, you just take a look at this thing, question number 6. So you see there we actually show that nu has to satisfy the inequality minus half. So nu has to be less than half. Okay, so how can it tend to infinity? Okay, so a typing mistake. Okay, so in the question, there's a typing mistake. Okay, so this thing is wrong. Okay, this is wrong. It should be nu tends to half. Okay, so just quickly going to the next page for 8C. So again, if we consider this constitutive relation, sigma ij is equal to lambda epsilon kk delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. So what happens, okay, for an incompressible material? So basically, when we are working under the purview of this kind of a limit that nu tends to half, okay, so we are working under this scope that nu tends to half, which implies that lambda is tending to infinity, as we have just seen in question number 8b. Then what happens in this one?
So that lambda into epsilon kk term is indeterminate. That is 0 by 0 form.
Right, right. So you see here, this, if we consider this lambda into epsilon kk. So from question number 8, we were seeing that when we are talking about incompressible material, so our epsilon kk is 0. And we are also saying that all of this implies that when the cubical dilatation is 0, basically the nu tends to half, and when the nu tends to half, the lambda tends to infinity. So that basically means that 1 by lambda is tending to 0. So basically this term, that is the 0 by 0 form. Okay, or equivalently, it is the infinity by infinity form, whichever way you want to look at it, because epsilon equal to 0 means epsilon tending to infinity. So either we take that in the denominator, whatever. Okay, so either the 0 by 0 form or the infinity by infinity form. So this is an indeterminate form. So this is something we have to be careful about. Okay, and question number 8D, it is very much reminiscent of what we learned in our fluid mechanics. Okay, so the constitutive relation with this indeterminate form is usually written as sigma ij is equal to minus p delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. Okay, so it is given to you that when we have such an indeterminate form for an incompressible solid material, then we have sigma ij is equal to minus p delta ij plus twice g epsilon ij. And we have to show that this p is of this form. I mean, it's not difficult to show this, but what I wanted to demonstrate by giving you this question was that for an incompressible material, we simply cannot persist with this general kind of what we had obtained earlier. We have to slightly adjust our constitutive relation by this kind of an unknown P. Okay, so this P is the pressure that actually is connected with the mean stress. Okay, so that's it for question number 8, and I have run out of time here. So maybe this question number 9 and 10 we can discuss a bit later. So as far as tomorrow's test is concerned, you need not be unduly worried about question number 9. I have not discussed it. I will not ask a question like that. Okay. But whatever I have discussed, okay, you can be sure that there will be some problem involving that. Okay, so no need to worry about what I have not covered, what I could not cover. But what I have covered, please be very careful with it. All right. So with that, I'll hang up now. Shayan, please stop the recording.